Hello and welcome to Making Through the Seasons. My name is Lauren. I live in New England with my husband and our 2 young children. You can find me on Ravelry as Lauren's Makes. In this video, I'm going to share some of the things that I worked on in the month of August. One thing that we did in the month of August is we built this little pond here. My children and husband and I dug the hole in the backyard and put in a little pond liner with the intention of eventually filling it up with some fish. We also spent a week camping in Niantic, Connecticut, and I'm going to share a little bit of the footage from some of the things that we did and saw while we were there as well. And I'll also share the garlic harvest. In the month of August, I was able to take the garlic that we had harvested. It was fully dried, and I tidied it up, cleaned it up, and put it away storage to use for the rest of the year. This year I grew a little more than 100 heads of garlic, and I typically grow about this much, and it usually lasts me all winter and into the next spring when the next garlic harvest is just about ready to come out.
Oh, winter!
I had a couple of large aloe plants and they put on a bunch of aloe pups, and so I was able to take the pups from the larger aloe plants and I repotted them, so I have a whole host of new aloe plants ready to go.
I'm using this as bug spray. Yeah, water will let's start with water.
Yeah.
This month I continued to work on my Solandra pullover. This is a pattern by KNIT, and you can find all the information for mine over on my Ravelry page. And I knit this with US 8s and US 9s, which is the needle recommended in the pattern. I made mine a little bit cropped and slightly oversized as well, with the intention that I'm going to wear this over dresses. And so I wanted it to be a little bit shorter so that it would sort of sit right around my natural waist. The yarn that I used for this, I actually purchased that yarn back in maybe 2016 at a Rhinebeck festival, which is the New York and Sheep and Wool Festival. And I had attempted to knit it up in a different sweater, and I didn't enjoy the way that the yarn and pattern were working together. And so I frogged and washed the yarn and started this Solandra pullover as a different pattern to use the yarn with. I really like the way that the yarn and the pattern look. It can be a little bit difficult in the photos and the videos of this to get the right color. What you see here, this real like goldenrod, golden yellow, is the accurate color. When I take some of the footage here inside, it washes out the color a little bit. I put a little bit of pink yarn woven inside so that when I look at the sweater, when I go to put it on, it's going to be easier to tell where the front and the back are. The sweater does have short row shaping, but I find that having just something in the back of the neck of the sweater makes it so much easier to figure out which way's front and which way's back when I go to put it on. So here you can see that I finished knitting this sweater, and the crop length is what I wanted it to be. The sleeve length is really long, and I'm not sure that that's something I'm going to stay with, or whether I might shorten the sleeves just a little bit because it is very roomy. The one thing that I'm dissatisfied with is the neck collar. So I did an Italian bind off for the collar of this, and I absolutely love the bind off. It's beautiful. It took me 2 tries to get it just right, but overall I think that the boat neck wideness of the collar isn't something that I'm going to be happy wearing. I think it's just slightly too wide. And so some of the thoughts that I had on how to resolve that is to decrease around the top and to pull it in and then do another bind off. I think when I do reduce the total number of stitches at the top, I'm going to switch away from the Italian bind off, just because at that point it will no longer be a 1x1 ribbing.
Mom, that sound is...
This month I continued working on my granny wrap. This is a crochet pattern by Anna Bauhaus. I made mine in a fingering weight yarn, and I used 3.5mm needles. The yarn that I used is a yarn that I naturally dyed myself, and so I have 3 different madder dyed hues or levels of madder dyed yarn, as well as 1 natural one, and so it gradiates from the light natural wool color through to the deeper madder dyed yarn that you can see sort of being knit here at the end of it. And I did finish the crocheting here of the entire shawl. And one of the things that I am thinking about right now is I have little bits of some of the different levels of the colored yarn, and I'm really tempted to add a fringe to the shawl. I have a shawl that I absolutely love. It's the Farmhouse shawl, and I wear it all the time, and it has this nice fringe at the bottom, and I think that that might be part of why I wear it so much, or part of the appeal is that I absolutely love the fringe on it. So I think there's still some more work to be done on this. If I have enough of the leftover bits of yarn, I'm definitely going to test out what it would look like with a fringe to see if it's going to do exactly what I want it to. In August, I started a new project. I am making a second granny wrap. Again, that's the Anna Bauhaus pattern. And with this one, I'm using a big twist yarn, and the colorway is called Rainbow Bright. This is a worsted weight yarn, so it's much thicker than the fingering weight version that I did for myself. And for this one, I am using a 5.5mm hook. This is a shawl that I'm making for my daughter, and she is 9 years old. So I had picked out some yarn and a pattern to make my son a shawl because he had expressed this desire to have a shawl, and my daughter was like, well, I'd like one too. And so while I was making the fingering weight version of the granny wrap, she's like, I really like this one. I'd like one like this. And so we picked out this Rainbow Bright yarn, and I'm using her body to sort of figure out how big to make this. I think that, being so small, I envision that this will be something that is more worn in the house, something that she can wrap around herself and get cozy in the house. I think that it will probably be something slightly large for her to actually wear outside of the house. So I think it's more going to be something, to cozy up in rather than to wear to school or out in. And as I mentioned, my son had been the one to first start the whole I'd like a shawl. And so I actually picked up some purple yarn at my Spinners Guild. Had an auction where all of the members of the guild brought in different things from their stash that they were no longer interested in. And I picked up this purple worsted weight yarn. I got a couple large skeins of it, and I decided that I would make him a shawl. His favorite color is like a royal purplish color. And so I have mentioned before that that I knit myself the Farmhouse shawl. This is a cabin 4 pattern, and this is the pattern that I decided I would make for my son as well. I knit this on US 10s, which are 6mm needles, and again I'm using him as sort of a template or a size to try to figure out how big to make it. And with his, I'm going to make the cabin 4's Farmhouse shawl, but I'm going to omit the fringe part, so it'll just be the shawl itself. And the shawl, the yarn that I'm using to make the shawl is it's an acrylic yarn. And so it won't block out in quite the same way that the pattern is. So I'm altering the edge just slightly. The edge of the original pattern has some stockinette rounds to end the shawl, and I've added I'm adding a garter section to this to try to counteract some of that edge roll that would definitely occur with a acrylic based yarn. And the next thing up on my needles is a sock. This is a cast on from last month. I'm calling this sort of my cozy socks. I'm knitting these on 2.25mm needles. And this is some King Cole yarn that I had picked up when we were on vacation in June. And these are just a real basic sock. I knit the 2x2 rib at the top and then moved on to the body of the sock. The yarn it's an interesting yarn. It's got this fuzzier texture to it. It's not really a halo, but it's more of like a texture of the yarn itself. And when I knit the leg part of it, they were sort of slouchy and a little bit roomy, which I actually really like for a sock that I envision wearing in the house. But I decided for the feet of the sock, I was going to bring it in a little bit. So I reduced an extra few stitches after the heel flap and gusset to make the foot part a little bit snugger so that they don't move around too much inside my slippers. I don't envision really wearing these socks outside the house. They seem somewhat more of like a slipper sock type of texture to them, and not necessarily something that I'm going to wear outside. And just a quick mention of the bag that the socks are living in. I made this bag as part of the Summer of Stitching with the Bakery Bears, and I used just little bits of scraps of fabric from various projects that I had around the house. The next project that I'm going to talk about is a project that I had been working on in the springtime, and then when summer came, I put this project to the side. Mostly it just required a little more brain space than I was able to give it when my kids were home on summer vacation. And this is the Argyle hat pattern. This is a pattern by Harry Wells, and it's available on Ravelry. I knit this using US 5 3.75mm needles, and I use used a series of Ashford Merino DK yarn in various colors to knit this. At this point, I have finished the knitting of the hat itself. So I did the Argyle, and then I joined it in the round and did the crown decreases. I chose the option, I believe it was option number 1 for crown decreases. The pattern gives you 2 possible crown decrease options, and I chose the sort of simpler version of crown decreases. And the next step on this is that I've blocked it and pinned it to help that Argyle, where I knit the Argyle flat, allow that to block the edges so that they're a little less curled, where I can then seam them together. And overall, I enjoyed knitting this. It definitely required me to pay more attention, and it is certainly not without some errors and issues. After I finish sewing it together, I will be duplicate stitching in a couple of areas where I obviously had a little bit of trouble following the pattern, and I was off just a stitch or two in the diamond, and so I'm just going to duplicate stitch to make it wearable at this point. But I think this was really excellent practice, and I look forward to moving on to the Argyle sock for the level 2 of the master hand knitting. I've already picked out the pattern and yarn for that. I just haven't quite worked up the courage yet to get that project started. Thank you so much for joining me and seeing what I got up to this month from a making perspective. I hope that all of you out there had a really productive summer as well, and I look forward to showing what I make as we get into the cozy season. Thanks. Bye.